And we are so pleased to be able to call in our next guest, one of my old colleagues from Capitol Hill, former Congressman, former chairman of the House Science Committee, Bob Walker of Pennsylvania. Bob, thanks so much for Skyping in with us here on America's Forum.
Great to be with you today, JD.
Now, before we get to the topic of climate change, since you chaired the Science Committee, let me talk to you some about political science. If you were in the chair in place of Darrell Issa with Jonathan Gruber, who called Americans stupid for swallowing Obamacare, how would you handle the questioning, Bob?
Well, I think it's very important that what they do is stick to the facts and use a lot of what we know about Obamacare and its failures to go directly at Jonathan Gruber, and also use the facts of what he's already said and force him to explain that. Look, I mean, remember, he's had now several weeks, if not months, to prepare for this hearing, and so he's going to have a lot of things to say that won't track with the facts, would be my guess. And so sticking with the facts and making certain that this is a hearing that is very, very focused will be quite important.
Now, Congressman, changing gears back to climate change, there was just a report out that the recent California drought, 3 years, they're saying is not related to climate change. It's just natural occurrences. What are your thoughts behind this?
Most of what happens in weather, look, our climate is a very, very complex system. And the fact is that we go through periods of dryness and wetness and so on based upon very natural conditions. And so the fact that every time we get some anomaly in the climate, a lot of the proponents of climate change say, look, this is an example of global warming, just doesn't track with the reality of science. It's very important when we're talking about climate to stick with the reality of science, not the political agenda of science.
Almost like more political science there, Bob. We've got a little more than 2.5 minutes here. It's interesting to note that that report came out of the UN body that takes a look at so-called climate change. They're meeting right now in Peru. Another one of their findings is that most people are not concerned about climate change. Is this a situation where the people of the world, not only the United States, are ahead of the so-called climatologists and those who've tried to politicize this into a legitimate science?
Well, I think more and more people are coming to the conclusion that there's a political agenda tied to all of the climate change talk that goes beyond the science. I'm all for pursuing the science about climate because it's extremely important that we understand as much as we can about this whole area of climate and what it means. But there has been a political agenda tied to this, and I think the people of the world are waking up to that. Let's face it, I mean, many times the American people and the people of the world are not quite as dumb as some politicians think they are. And I think they've seen through this, and their common sense tells them that there are things in their lives that are extremely more important. That same study showed that they think education is very important. Well, guess what? Most people do believe that education is at the top of the list of what we have to do in a world that's changing as much as our world is.
So, Congressman, just over a minute left. One of the other findings of the UN is that the cost of climate change could reach $500 billion a year, which is 2 to 3 times more than they had initially thought. Why is it costing so much, and how could we have been so far off in our estimations?
Well, the fact is that anytime you deal with complex systems, it gets expensive. But what I think people have come to the conclusion on is, look, there are a lot of technologies that are coming along that can help us deal with the issues of climate. And more importantly, the better understanding we have, the less the cost will be of trying to mitigate those problems. And so I think that there's a lot of common sense that goes along with the science here that simply isn't being brought into the debate by those who are the proponents.
And Bob Walker, we appreciate you supplying a good dose of that common sense. Thanks so much for Skyping in from Washington, D.C. this morning for your thoughts, not only on so-called climate change, but on that Government Reform and Oversight Committee hearing. If you've got some thoughts on climate change, the reality or the fiction of it, why don't you tweet me your thoughts at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. When we come back, Washington behind closed doors as the House Republicans are meeting.